Well, Stephen, they can't read our brains now, buddy. That's for darn sure.
Oh yeah, Will. With these tinfoil hats, we're gonna keep the aliens away from all our thoughts.
But you know who's going to be messing with us the most?
Who's that?
Haley.
Haley's an alien confirmed, brothers and sisters.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Campfire. We're wearing our special hats because today we're talking about those beyond the stars, the aliens.
Aliens, yes. One of Will, my fellow co-host's favorite topics. I feel like you've been making many alien jokes for a while, and now here we are, finally doing an episode. So, if you are new to our podcast, we are Beyond the Campfire. We cover cults, conspiracies, mysteries, and all of that. You just met one of our co-hosts over there, Will, aka the Cowboy. I am Stephen, aka Sahil the Indian, aka Sahil the Disciple, aka Mr. aka, and we're here.
Yeah, listen, there's a reason we're not in the barn. That's because we live in the South and it's hot as hell outside, and you know, with our tinfoil hats, we'd be sweating, man. We'd be sweating out there. It's oof.
I kind of like being here, though. We have, this nice table. The lights are kind of dim, so, it's kind of got a little spooky house kind of feeling. We still do have our campfires here. And, yeah, we got tinfoil hats. So, what's not there to not love about life right now?
I know, everything's going great. So today we are going to be covering our very first alien episode. I'm not like a big alien fan. I just think it's funny to, wear the tinfoil hat and kind of get into the meme. And now we say that, and tonight me and Steve are going to wake up in a spacecraft and I'm like, you think we're a meme?
If I wake up and I'm getting probed and prodded the way the prostitutes last week were by Jack the Ripper, it's been a good life.
Well, to be fair, I think all they do is just shove a rod up your ass and I'd call it good.
Yeah, anyway. So, anything else before we jump into it, Will?
Not really. So this isn't an alien abduction story. This is one of the most famous stories of, anything out there. And this is the Roswell crash. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you're ready and buckled up and rock and rolling.
Yeah, let's do that. So, start us off, Will. Where are we at? What are we doing? What's happening?
All right. So, our story begins in the summer of 1947 on a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico. Kind of getting the feel there. So this is why we call it the Roswell crash. Okay. Rancher Mac Brazel found some unusual debris scattered across his land. This debris included strange metal fragments and other materials he couldn't identify. Naturally, he reported his findings to the local authorities, and that's when things started to get interesting. So, sounds pretty like alien-esque. Maybe it was aliens, maybe it wasn't aliens, right? Sounds pretty normal so far, right?
Yeah, if I'm out there cattle ranching or farming or whatever, and I see this, I don't know. Yeah, it's a normal day for the most part, I guess. So, okay, what happens next?
So, as I said, you would think, he sees this and he's like, gotta call the cops, right? So he reports his findings to the local authority. And this is where, things start to drastically go wrong for him, or at least for all of us, because the local Roswell Army Airfield, they sent Major Jesse Marcel to investigate, okay? So you're first off okay, this dude finds some random debris in his field. It probably is nothing too serious. Calls the authorities, and the cops are like, send in the Air Force. So they sent in the Air Force, and he collected the debris and brought it back to the base. Unfortunately, we're going to put up the picture now. I did not write down that picture, unfortunately. But as you guys can see there's this famous picture where you see the guys looking at the crash, okay? So he collected the debris and brought it back. So on July 8th, 1947, Okay, the public information officer at Roswell issued a press release claiming they had recovered a flying disc.
Yeah, see, that gets me excited because, I'm calling the authorities thinking, okay, what is this? Next thing I know, high-ranking officials are coming and looking at this. I'm like, oh, okay, this is really interesting. And now they're saying they've recovered a flying disc. I mean, my curiosity is piqued. Like, what on earth could this be? Or what outside of Earth could this be?
Listen, and that's just where it gets more interesting, right? Because they're like, flying disc, that's what it was. So this caused like news and everything to start spreading like a wildfire. Like everybody's picking up the story, everybody's coming to Roswell, figuring out what's going on. So you gotta imagine, like, there's excitement, curiosity sparked. It's like going bananas. But then, almost as quickly as it began, the story changed. The military retracted their initial statement and claimed the debris was from a weather balloon. A weather balloon, huh? Weather balloon, sure. And that, of course, explanation didn't sit well with everyone, and it certainly didn't put the speculation to rest. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a long history in the U.S. of the government lying to us, purposefully misleading us, and trying to take away our attention from things that we're looking at. So, I mean, the guy who found it, I'm sure he looked at that, and he's probably thinking, weather balloon? He's like, that was not a weather balloon.
Well, that's the thing that, like when I was doing the research, is, I mean, it was like immediately they find the debris, and then all of a sudden they're like, bro, you just got a UFO, a flying disc in your backyard. And then, for some reason, the military says, that didn't happen, it was a weather balloon. Don't worry about it. That, to me, shoots up some red flags. That, to me, wants to strap on my tinfoil hat and dive deeper. Which is what we're going to do. Are you ready to go beyond the stars?
Let's go beyond the stars, yeah.
Alright. So, over the next few decades, the Roswell Incident faded into relative obscurity, overshadowed by other events. So, again, this was 47. So then, a couple of years, it's just kind of there. But then you got the Korean War, and then Vietnam happens. And people just kind of forget about the whole Roswell Incident until the late 1970s. Comes roaring back at the spotlight. And so that's right. In 1980, Charles Berlitz and William L. Moore published a book called The Roswell Incident, which revived public interest and introduced the idea that the crash was actually an extraterrestrial spacecraft. So, like, originally, in 47, everybody was just kind of like, there's this strange object that crashed. Like, UFOs were not a big hype back then. And so, but then, like, for the government to say this and then redact the statement saying it's a weather balloon, it kind of made some people start questioning things. And then, like we said, throughout the years, the 70s happened, everybody's like smoking pot and nobody's caring. But then, like, the 80s roll around, and this guy, like I said, published a book. You can go read it. I did not read the book. I probably should have read it to get myself prepared for this. Oops. Do we do our research? No. Anyways. Yeah, so he writes the book, and then it kind of like, being the 80s, it just pops back up.
Yeah, really interesting. I am really curious about that book and what exactly was in it to generate that much public interest. Because, I grew up hearing about Roswell, and I was born in the late 90s, so obviously that book started interest in it that continues to this day. Here I was still hearing about it in the early 2000s. I'm sure kids now are still hearing about it. So, yeah, it must have been quite the book.
I know, and that's like, that's the thing too. Like, I feel like Roswell became one of the most famous, like, UFO stories just because, like, the way it is. And, like, we'll continue a little bit more because the U.S. Air Force got even more shady in the 80s. That rhymed, shady in the 80s. Yeah, and it just, like, you're sitting there and you probably think to yourself, well, this is a quick episode. We all know Roswell was aliens. Or you might be sitting there like, well, this pretty much is pretty quick. You've got UFO crash, Air Force like, nah, that was a balloon. Dies out, but then the 80s, these two guys are like, we're going to write a book about this and prove to people as aliens. And you're probably just like, okay, well then that must be the end of it. But it's not the end of it. Because this revived the public's interest and introduced the idea. The book featured accounts from supposed witnesses and alleged that the government had recovered not just the craft, but alien bodies as well. This book, along with numerous documentaries, interviews, and TV shows, fueled a growing belief in a massive government cover-up. So like back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, nobody believed that there was a government cover-up. They just kind of like, all right, cool. But then this guy brings forth and it's like, I've got witnesses, I've got testimonies, I've got evidence. And it just like blew up to where people just said, the government's covering this up.
I almost wonder how much of the book being so successful in the 80s was built off of Americans developing a general distrust of the government after what happened in the 70s and 60s with the Vietnam War and, you know, just the probes on figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy. And I just feel like the 80s in some ways was prime time for a book like this to come out because people were really not trusting their government anymore.
And I think at that point, like a lot of people were just believing in a lot of things in the 80s. We're going to cover on this podcast at some point, like the satanic panic of the 80s. Uh-oh, they're going to get your brain, Steve. They're going to get your brain!
Don't worry, my brain's protected again.
That looks like you're a unicorn.
Oh wait, yeah, let me fix it.
Yeah, while Steven fixes his tinfoil hat. Anyways, yeah, so like I think like the satanic panic, which we're going to cover, like kind of really fueled all of this. I mean, the 80s were a wild time, like, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you know, and why wouldn't people want to believe something like this, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the 80s too, really, I mean, you just had the moon landing about a decade and a half before. Ronald Reagan was kind of setting the scene for maybe not more space travel, but kind of just a more developed military, a more developed economy. Like there was a sense of, I think there was government distrust, but there also was a sense of wonder of like, oh, what else is out there in the universe? So I think a lot of just factors came together to make the 80s a prime time for these kind of things to happen.
Yeah, and it really didn't help because, and going back to what you're saying about not trusting the government, it is stated that it didn't help that the many military and government records from that period were either missing or classified, adding to the aura of secrecy and conspiracy. So you've got like a good pot, you know, to make good brownies, you know, good conspiracy brownies, to where it's people didn't trust the government. You know, this guy writes a book about UFOs, claims he's got eyewitness accounts. You've got the government trying to cover it up, it sounds like. And now you've got them saying that there were bodies coming out of the UFO, and then the documents and everything are missing. Like, I'm going to read from it in just a little bit, but I did find an actual thing from literally the FBI Vault's website. So this is like an actual document. And then another paper I'm going to read from is like from the actual U.S. Air Force's page. And I'll read that after that. So yeah, it's not looking too good for the government. I mean,
does it ever look good for the government?
No, it never does. So the first thing I have, we're going to go back to Roswell's Incident, and this is apparently the report from the FBI vault. It's kind of hard to read because they did scratch out some things, but this is from the director in Cincinnati, I'm guessing. This is from FBI Dallas. Flying disc information concerning. And then they redacted a bunch of information. Headquarters 8th Air Force telephonically advised this office that an object purporting to be a flying disc was recovered near Roswell, New Mexico, this date. The disc is hexagonal in shape and was suspended from a balloon by a cable, which balloon has appropriately 20 feet in diameter. Further advised that the object found resembles a high-altitude weather balloon with a radar reflector, but that telephonic conversion between their office and right field had not borne out this belief. Disc and balloon being transported to right field by special plane for examination. Information provided this office because of national interest in case. In fact, the National Broadcasting Company, Associated Press, and others attempting to break story of location of this today. Advised would request Wright Field to advise Cincinnati office results of examination. No further investigation being conducted. And this was dated, August 6th. Not August. 7 is July, right? Yeah, July 8th, 1947 at 6:17 p.m.
Interesting. I almost wonder what the redacted words are, but yeah, for them to later say like, oh, it's just a weather balloon. It's just like, well, no. I mean, that report right there. Granted, they did say weather balloon in that report, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. So there's something there's something they're not telling us.
Yeah, and that's where, like, to me, there was a report that right after the crash happened, that came out. The next report I plan to disclose is going to be after I read my next little tidbit, because the plot kind of thickens, because it's like, the government could have left it at this. Let them believe what they want to believe. The truth is it was a weather balloon. Which I would have been like, okay, case closed, close it up. However, according to this, in response to the mounting public pressure and growing belief in UFO cover-up theory, the U.S. Air Force conducted an investigation and released 2 reports in the 1990s. The first, in 94, concluded that the debris was from a top-secret project called Project Mogul. I think that's how you spell it. It's M-O-G-U-L. Mogul was designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests using high-altitude balloons equipped with sensitive microphones. The materials described in the original reports, metallic-looking foil, rubber, and sticks, fits this explanation. That wasn't enough to dispel all the rumors. So, yeah.
Okay, so on one level, I'm like, oh, the Air Force investigating the U.S. government. This is like investigating yourself. I was like, what do you think they're going to do? But on another level, I'm like, okay, that explanation kind of makes sense, As fascinating as it would be for it to be aliens, I could also see it being, yeah, this was a top secret U.S. project. Unfortunately, it ended up landing in a place it shouldn't have. But that would be an explanation for why the U.S. government was being secretive, without there necessarily having to be aliens.
Well, this is the special report from 94, because they did come out with another report later. This is the report from 94, and it says, in July 1994, the Office of the Secretary of Air Force concluded an extensive search for records in response to a General Accounting Office, GAO, inquiry of an event popularly known as the Roswell Incident. The focus of the GAO probe, initiated at the request of a member of Congress, was to determine if the U.S. Air Force or any other U.S. government agency possessed information on the alleged crash and recovery of an extraterrestrial vehicle and its alien occupants near Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947. The 1994 Air Force report concluded that the predecessors to the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Army Air Forces recovered debris from an Army Air Forces balloon-borne research project codenamed Mogul. Records located describing research carried out under the Mogul project, most of which were never classified and publicly available, as I didn't read the Mogul thing. Were collected, provided to GAO, and published in one volume for ease of access to the general public. I'm going to see if I can find that while you talk, and I'm going to see if I can read that. This report discusses the result of this exhaustive research and identifies the likely source of the claim of alien bodies at Roswell. Contrary to allegations, many of the accounts appear to be descriptions of unclassified and widely publicized Air Force scientific achievements. Other descriptions of bodies appear to be actual incidences in which Air Force members were killed or injured in the line of duty. The conclusions are: Air Force activities, which occurred over a period of many years, have been consolidated and are now represented to have occurred in 2 or 3 days in July 1947. Aliens observed in the New Mexico desert were actually anthropomorphic test dummies that were carried aloft by U.S. Air Force high-altitude balloons for scientific research. The unusual military activities in the New Mexico desert were high-altitude research balloon launch and recovery operations. Reports of military units that always seemed to arrive shortly after the crash of a flying saucer to retrieve the saucer and crew were actually accurate descriptions of Air Force personnel engaged in anthropomorphic dummy recovery operations. Claims of alien bodies at Roswell Army Airfield Hospital were most likely a combination of two separate incidences. The executive summary. The report is based on thoroughly documented research supported by official records, technical reports, film footage, photographs, and interviews with individuals who were involved in these events.
Yeah, and like as much as me and Will make fun of the government, I do tend to be slightly more pro-government than he is, which.
God, damn straight.
But like, yeah, you know, when the government gives out explanations like that, I do tend to believe them. I'm like, okay, people saw bodies being taken out, they're gonna think it's aliens. Government says nope, it was anthropomorphic dummies. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. The government. You know, people think, oh, it's a flying saucer, it's a disc from outer space. The government says, nope, it was a highly classified, you know, military testing thing we were flying. I'm just like, okay, yeah, that also makes sense too. You know, obviously, if you're a normal person looking at these things, it could look like aliens and spacecraft, when in reality, it's highly classified government material. So, I know you're pulling up more information. But as of right now, you know, the skeptic in me is saying this is not aliens. But Will, I know you have more for us. What you got?
So this is just kind of describe what Project Mogul was. Again, like we said earlier, it was a top secret project by the U.S. Army Air Forces, and it apparently involved putting microphones on high altitude balloons whose primary purpose was long distance detection of sound waves generated by Soviet atomic bomb tests. It's carried out from 1947 until early 1949. It was a classified portion of an unclassified project by New York University atmospheric researchers. It was moderately successful, but was very expensive and was superseded by a network of seismic detectors and air sampling for fallout, which were cheaper, more reliable, and easier to deploy and operate. So, apparently it was created by this guy named Maurice Ewing, who had done deep sound channels in the ocean and theorized that a similar sound channel existed in the upper atmosphere. A certain height where the air pressure and temperature results in minimal speed of sound, so the sound waves would propagate and stay in that channel due to refraction. So like a whole bunch of science mumbo jumbo. And it's crazy because on this they do have the Roswell Incident. And they do claim like on this page, on the Wikipedia page for it, that it did crash in Roswell. Looking at the height of this though, it says that the balloon train was only 657 feet off the ground, which is like half the height of the Eiffel Tower. So that's Project Mogul for you.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, I don't know. All the evidence considered, I mean, the government definitely did lie at the time it happened, but now that the Air Force has kind of done more investigation, I mean, I don't know. To me, extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof. You know, people can say it's aliens all they want, and you know, again, I've mentioned the not deer a lot of times, but as much as I love the not deer, not great evidence for the not deer. In this case, too, not great evidence for aliens. Sometimes the most logical explanation is the most logical explanation, and so for me, I'm taking the Air Force reports at face value, and I'm just like, okay, yeah. So that's me.
Well, I think, and then of course, like I further read it, it goes, and then in 1997, the Air Force released a second report addressing the claims of alien bodies. They suggested that these were likely crash test dummies, as we said earlier, which could explain the description of non-human entities. Which, to me, it's like, well, first off, why are you strapping a dummy to a weather balloon? It's a weather balloon. What are you trying to test? That a person could survive that high of a fall? What?
It almost makes you wonder, were they purposefully planning to crash the weather balloon? Because it seems like they weren't intending for it to crash. Which makes me wonder, okay, I will say that is an interesting point. I don't know if that leads me to a belief in aliens quite yet, but it is suspicious at the very least. So I'll give you that.
And like the thing, like, you know, it's very, very suspicious to me. And I mean, first off, okay, and then like the government, and I got some more stuff to read, but then the government is sitting there trying to do an investigation on themselves. All right, Haley, I'm talking to you. All right, this is your boss. I want the meme of Spider-Man pointing at himself, and then put the U.S. Air Force and the FBI. Thank you.
There you go. So, I know you have more stuff to read, but I guess just out of speculation, if these were aliens, do you think this is more like? So yeah, we got E.T. Could it be like the things from War of the Worlds, the Greys? What do you think these aliens would look like?
I think if anything, I mean, it would be funny if they did look like us. They just look like a regular human being, and we're out there like, oh, there's aliens, but like really, it's just other people. I think the most realistic idea I could probably think of is probably like the Greys. I don't think they're green like Martians. I think they're definitely probably gray, kind of look like the humanoids, like with the big eyes, and I think that's probably might have been what they were coming from Roswell.
I always find it funny in movies when aliens are like basically humans, but a little bit different. So like Thanos, for example, like bro is a human, but he's purple and has a bigger chin. But other than that, he looks exactly like the way people do. So I always find those kinds of things funny when they depict aliens in that way. But yeah. Any kind of final comments, thoughts, remarks?
Yeah. So as I said, the Air Force did all that. But again, like we were just saying, despite these descriptions of non-human entities, despite the official explanations, many people remain unconvinced. Like, what we're saying, what alien do you think it could be? And, they argue that the government's changing stories and the secrecy surrounding the events point to a cover-up. Some even believe that the Project Mogul explanation was itself a smokescreen. That's what makes it so compelling. Even after all these years, we're still talking about it, still debating it. It's a story that refuses to fade away, much like the mystery lights in the night sky. So yeah, I mean, Roswell. What do you think happened at Roswell?
I mean, I was saying it earlier, but I tend to believe the 90s report. I think the government was, World War II had just ended. They're starting to gear up for the Cold War. I could see the U.S. government preparing some secret military projects. One of them crashed in Roswell. At first, they try to cover it up. But to me, that seems like a pretty likely explanation. The alien one seems a little less likely for me. So at least for this episode and with this incident, I'm skeptical. Could it be aliens? Probably not, is my opinion. What about you, Will?
For me, on this podcast, you're going to notice that I'm not the skeptic. Steven's the skeptic. Like, do I believe there are aliens? I don't know. Could there truly be some alien race out there that we have not met or encountered? Maybe. So my theory, I guess my thoughts on Roswell, I kind of agree with some of these people. I agree with some of these people. Like, think about it. Okay, the Roswell incident happens. The government says it's a disc. Then they backtrack themselves and say, okay, it's a balloon. Then all this stuff happens. The Vietnam War, the Korean War, these protests, the civil rights movements. Everybody kind of moves on from Roswell and focuses on something else. But then this guy comes out, writes a book claiming that, or these two guys write a book claiming about the Roswell incident, that it was in fact aliens and the government was trying to cover everything up. And then people are like, oh yeah, the government's definitely covering this up. And the government, instead of just ignoring it and just leaving it with, it was a weather balloon, whatever, come back to push that claim even harder with like Project Mogul. And then why are you putting a crash test dummy in a weather balloon? It just, none of it makes sense. And therefore, I do not think it's a government cover-up, I do think it's a government cover-up. I do not believe what the government is saying, and I think that there might be something more out there that we're just not seeing. Something maybe beyond the stars.
Hey, I'm always happy to be proven wrong. I like to think our world is a little bit more mystical than it appears, so you know, hey, if in a few decades it turns out that aliens are real and that's what happened in Roswell, I'm happy to be proven wrong. But yeah, I think that'll do it. Will, any closing thoughts to finish us out?
Well, I mean, and to kind of go to my theory, aliens could be real, or it could just be them setting us up for Project Bluebeam. I recommend you go look at Project Bluebeam. That is where people believe that the government is going to fake an alien invasion and bring forth a godlike being to make us believe and worship it, to where the government can take over. Look up Project Bluebeam and try to sleep at night. But, I mean, yeah, other than that, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Beyond Campfire. Make sure you follow us everywhere you can get a podcast at Beyond the Campfire. Make sure you follow us on YouTube at Beyond the Campfire Podcast, as well on TikTok with the same name, Beyond the Campfire Podcast. And yeah, stay safe out there, guys. Make sure, you know, you don't get abducted or probed and wake up with a sore butt. Yeah, thank you guys. We'll catch you guys on the next one.